George Strait goes through the drive-thru of a Dairy Queen in Cotulla and surprises the employees. What happened next shocked everyone. The morning sun beat down mercilessly on the small town of Cotulla, Texas, as Maria Sanchez pulled her weathered Honda Civic into the employee parking lot of the Dairy Queen, where she had worked for the past 3 years. The asphalt was already radiating heat despite the early hour, promising another scorching April day in South Texas. Maria glanced at her reflection in the rearview mirror, quickly dabbing at the dark circles under her eyes before reaching for her name tag. "Another day, another dollar," she whispered to herself, a mantra that had kept her going through countless difficult mornings. At 28, Maria carried responsibilities far beyond her years. 2 young children depending solely on her, nursing school tuition payments that seemed to grow each semester, and the crushing weight of rebuilding a life after losing everything in the devastating storm that had swept through Cotulla just months earlier. As she walked through the back entrance, Maria straightened her shoulders and fixed her trademark smile on her face. No customer would ever guess that she had been up since 4 that morning, studying for her anatomy exam after putting Miguel and Sofia to bed in the cramped 1-bedroom apartment she now shared with her Aunt Carmen. No one needed to know that. She had cried herself to sleep the night before after receiving another past due notice for her student loans. "Buenos dias, Javier," she called out to the cook who was already prepping for the breakfast rush. "How's your mom doing after her surgery?" "I just want to say how much I appreciate you all following along with our stories. If you're enjoying this journey with Maria and George, please subscribe to our channel and share where you're watching from in the comments below. Your support means everything, and I love hearing from each and every one of you. Now, let's get back to this incredible story unfolding in small-town Texas." Javier's face brightened at her question. This was Maria's gift, genuine concern for others, despite her own troubles. "Much better, Maria. The doctor says she can go home tomorrow. Thanks for asking." Maria tied her apron around her waist and checked the schedule. Another 8-hour shift on drive-thru duty awaited her. The morning crowd would be arriving soon, ranch hands grabbing breakfast, mothers dropping kids at school before work, and the usual assortment of regulars who came as much for Maria's warm greeting as for the food. "Heard anything about that apartment?" Javier asked as he flipped pancakes on the griddle. Maria shook her head. "Still waiting. They said my application looks good, but with my credit after the storm damage." She trailed off, unwilling to dwell on another disappointment. "It'll work out. It always does." The truth was far less certain than her confident words suggested. After the tornado had ripped the roof off her small rental house, destroying most of her belongings and leaving her and the children homeless, Maria had been forced to move in with Aunt Carmen. The arrangement, initially meant to last 2 weeks, was now stretching into its 4th month. 5 people sharing a 1-bedroom apartment was wearing on everyone's nerves, especially with Miguel and Sofia, both struggling to adjust to their new circumstances. "Carla's sister might have something available next month," Javier offered. "I can ask." "That would be great," Maria said, grateful for the network of friends who continually looked out for her. In Cotulla, population barely over 3,000, everyone knew everyone else's business, but they also took care of their own. It was both the blessing and curse of small-town life. The morning rush began precisely at 6:30, as predictable as the Texas sunrise. Maria fell into her familiar routine, taking orders, processing payments, and passing bags of food through the drive-thru window. Each customer received her full attention, a genuine smile, and often a personalized comment that made them feel special. "Mr. Reynolds, how did Billy's baseball tournament go last weekend?" she called to the high school principal as she handed him his regular order of a sausage biscuit and large coffee. "Took 2nd place. That boy of mine's got an arm like nobody's business," the older man beamed, his pride evident. Tell him congratulations from me, Maria replied warmly before turning to the next customer. By mid-morning, the rush had slowed to a trickle. Maria used the lull to wipe down the counter and restock supplies, her mind drifting to the nursing textbook waiting in her locker. If she could grab 15 minutes during her break, she might be able to review one more chapter. Before tonight's study group, her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of tires on gravel. A black Ford F-150 pickup truck, dust-covered but clearly well-maintained, pulled into the drive-through lane. Maria straightened her uniform and pressed the button on her headset. "Good morning, welcome to Dairy Queen. What can I get for you today?" she asked, her customer service voice bright and clear. There was a brief pause before a deep, gentle male voice responded. "Morning, Mom. Could I get a couple of breakfast tacos and a large black coffee, please?" Something about the voice struck Maria. A familiar cadence, a distinctive Texas drawl that seemed somehow recognizable. She brushed the thought aside. Working the drive-through, she heard dozens of voices every day. "Absolutely. Would you like anything else today, sir?" "That'll do me just fine," the man replied. "That'll be $7.43 at the window, sir." When the truck pulled forward, Maria was busy preparing the coffee. She turned, coffee cup in hand, and nearly dropped it when she saw who was sitting in the driver's seat. The weathered face, the signature mustache, and the kind eyes were unmistakable. George Strait, the king of country music himself, was at her drive-through window. "Oh, my goodness," she gasped before she could stop herself. George Strait smiled, warmly. "Morning," he said simply, as if he were any other customer and not a living legend with 60 #1 country hits to his name. Maria's hands trembled slightly as she handed him the coffee. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Strait. I never expected. We don't get many celebrities in Cotulla." "Don't get much good breakfast tacos in most places either," he replied, with a wink. "And please call me George." As Maria gathered his order, her mind raced. Her father had been George Strait's biggest fan. Marco Sanchez had played those cassettes and later CDs constantly throughout her childhood, singing along in his rich baritone voice while working on his truck in their driveway. "I Cross My Heart" had been her parents' wedding song, and her father had danced with Maria to it at every family gathering, twirling her around their living room floor. Her father had passed away 2 years ago, a construction accident that had left the family without its primary provider and Maria without her biggest supporter. He would have been absolutely starstruck to know George Strait had visited his daughter's drive-through. "Here you go, George," she said, passing the bag through the window. "My dad was your biggest fan. He used to say your music was the soundtrack of his life." Something in her voice must have touched the country star, because instead of simply taking his food and driving away, he paused. "Was?" Maria nodded, swallowing hard. "He passed away 2 years ago. Construction accident." George's expression softened with genuine sympathy. "I'm truly sorry to hear that, Miss Maria Sanchez." "Miss Maria Sanchez," he continued, "would you mind if I took a picture with you? I always like to meet real fans, or in this case, the daughter of a real fan." Stunned, Maria could only nod. George held out his phone and snapped a quick selfie of the two of them, Maria's eyes wide with surprise and disbelief. "What was your dad's favorite song of mine?" George asked as he tucked his phone away. "I Cross My Heart," Maria replied without hesitation. "He danced with my mom to it at their wedding, and he used to dance with me to it too when I was little. Said someday he'd dance with me at my wedding." Her voice caught on the last words. George nodded thoughtfully. "That's a special one. I'm honored it meant so much to him." Something about Maria's sincerity seemed to encourage further conversation, as the line behind George's truck was empty for the moment. "So you've lived in Cotulla your whole life?" he asked. "Yes, sir, born and raised. Trying to make a better life for my kids now. I have 2, Miguel's 7 and Sophia's 5. "And what would that better life look like for you, Maria?" His question wasn't idle curiosity. There was genuine interest in his eyes. Maria hesitated, unused to sharing her dreams with strangers, let alone country music royalty. "I'm in nursing school," she finally said. "Part-time while working here full-time. It's taking longer than I hoped, but someday I'll finish. My dad always believed I would make a great nurse." George nodded approvingly. "Sounds like your father was a wise man. The world needs more good nurses, that's for certain." A car pulled up behind his truck, and George glanced in his rearview mirror. "Looks like duty calls," he said with a smile. "It was a pleasure meeting you, Maria Sanchez. You keep working toward that dream, you hear? Your daddy would be proud." With that, he tipped his hat slightly, a gesture so quintessentially George Strait that Maria almost laughed at the surrealism of the moment and drove away. Maria stood frozen for a moment before the customer behind him honked lightly, bringing her back to reality. As she returned to taking orders, her mind kept replaying the brief encounter. Wait until she told Miguel and Sophia. They might be too young to understand who George Strait was, but they'd love hearing how their grandfather's musical hero had spoken to their mother. When her shift ended that afternoon, Maria couldn't wait to tell Aunt Carmen about the encounter. As she gathered her belongings from her locker, the restaurant manager, Debbie, called her into the small back office. "Maria, you had quite the celebrity encounter today," Debbie said with a smile. Maria nodded enthusiastically. "I still can't believe it happened. George Strait, right here in our drive-thru. Well, believe it or not, his manager just called the store," Debbie continued, her expression unreadable. "Apparently, Mr. Strait wants to speak with you again." Maria's heart skipped a beat. "With me? Why?" Debbie shrugged. "He didn't say. Just left a number for you to call when you get off work. Said it was important." As Maria stared at the piece of paper Debbie handed her, with a phone number scrawled across it, she couldn't begin to imagine why George Strait would want to speak with her again. Had she said something wrong? Was there an issue with his order? Or was it possible that their brief conversation about her father, her children, and her nursing dreams had somehow resonated with the country music legend in ways she couldn't foresee? With trembling fingers, Maria pulled her cell phone from her purse and dialed the number, stepping outside into the hot Texas afternoon. As the line began to ring, she leaned against the wall of the Dairy Queen, completely unaware that this phone call was about to change the course of her life forever. The phone rang 3 times before someone picked up. Maria held her breath, her free hand pressed against the sun-warmed brick wall of the Dairy Queen for support. "Norma Strait Productions," answered a crisp, professional female voice. Maria nearly hung up, certain she had dialed the wrong number. "I'm sorry, I think there's been a mistake. I was given this number to call about George Strait." "You must be Maria Sanchez." The woman's tone immediately warmed. "I'm Heather, Mr. Strait's personal assistant. He asked me to speak with you. He was quite impressed by your story this morning." Maria's knees felt suddenly weak. She slid down the wall until she was sitting on the concrete, oblivious to the curious glances from customers entering the restaurant. "He was impressed? By me?" "Indeed," Heather continued. "Mr. Strait mentioned you're a single mother working your way through nursing school. He was touched by your dedication and wanted to learn more about your situation." The conversation that followed felt surreal. Heather asked detailed questions about Maria's nursing program, her financial situation, her children's needs, and the damage their home had sustained in the storm. Maria found herself sharing details she rarely discussed with anyone. The crushing weight of her student loans, the exhaustion of balancing work and school, her fears about never providing her children with the stability they deserved. "Maria, George would like to meet with you properly," Heather finally said. "Not through a drive-through window. He's staying at his ranch near Pearsall through the weekend. Would you be able to bring your children and meet with him tomorrow afternoon?" Maria's heart raced. George Strait wanted to meet her family. The king of country music was interested in her struggles. It seemed impossible, perhaps even suspicious. "May I ask why?" she ventured cautiously. "Mr. Strait prefers to explain himself," Heather replied diplomatically, "but I can tell you he was genuinely moved by your brief conversation. Sometimes small encounters have big impacts. Would 2 o'clock tomorrow work for you?" After getting directions to the ranch and arranging for Debbie to cover her Saturday afternoon shift, a miracle in itself, Maria hung up the phone in a daze. She sat on the concrete for several minutes, trying to process what had just happened. "You okay?" asked Javier, who had emerged from the back door for his smoke break. Maria looked up, a mixture of confusion and hope crossing her face. "I think George Strait might be about to change my life," she said softly, "but I have absolutely no idea why." That evening, Maria struggled to explain the situation to her Aunt Carmen. "Dios mío, it could be dangerous," Carmen exclaimed in Spanish, her hands gesticulating wildly as they stood in the cramped kitchenette. "You don't know this man, Maria. Famous or not, you can't just take the children to some stranger's ranch." "Tia, it's George Strait," Maria insisted. "He's probably the most respected country artist in America. And we're meeting his staff, not going alone to some secluded place." Carmen's protective instincts had been in overdrive since Maria and the children had moved in. Having raised Maria after her own mother died of cancer when Maria was just 12, Carmen considered her more daughter than niece. Seeing her struggle as a single mother broke Carmen's heart daily. "Why would he want to help you?" Carmen asked, her tone softening. "These rich celebrities don't just help people randomly." Maria shrugged, the same question having plagued her all afternoon. "I don't know. Maybe something about Dad being his fan? Maybe he just connected with our story somehow." Across the small living room that doubled as Miguel and Sofia's bedroom, the children were building a fort out of couch cushions, blissfully unaware of the adults' tense conversation. Sofia, with her father's warm brown eyes and Maria's determined chin, was directing her older brother on proper cushion placement with the authority of a tiny construction foreman. "We're not getting our hopes up," Maria said firmly, watching her children. "I'll hear what he has to say, thank him politely, and that will be that. But Tia, if there's even a small chance he genuinely wants to help us..." Carmen's expression softened as she followed Maria's gaze to the children. "Your father would say, 'This is a miracle,'" she finally conceded. "Marcos always said George Strait was a good man, a family man." "Exactly," Maria whispered, tears threatening to spill. "Maybe Dad is watching over us somehow." Sleep was impossible that night. Maria lay on the pull-out sofa bed she shared with Sofia, listening to the gentle breathing of her daughter while her mind raced with possibilities and fears. What if this was all an elaborate prank? What if she had misunderstood something fundamental about the invitation? Worse, what if George Strait really did want to help but found her somehow undeserving upon meeting her properly? Morning brought no relief from her anxiety. Maria dressed the children in their best clothes, outfits reserved for church and special occasions. She brushed Sofia's long, dark hair until it shone, securing it with the sparkly barrettes that had somehow survived the tornado. Miguel reluctantly allowed her to comb his unruly hair and tuck in his only button-down shirt. "Why do we have to dress up to meet Mommy's friend?" he whined, fidgeting with his collar. "Because," Maria explained patiently, "Mr. Strait is a very important person, and we want to show him respect." "Is he rich?" Sofia asked bluntly, the way only 5-year-olds can. Maria hesitated. "Yes, he is, but that's not why he's important. He's important because he creates music that makes people happy, that helps them through hard times, like the songs Abuelo used to play for you, remember? The drive to George Strait's ranch took nearly 40 minutes from Cotulla. Maria's old Honda protested as they climbed the gentle hills of South Texas. the landscape becoming increasingly picturesque. They passed sprawling ranches with longhorn cattle grazing lazily under mesquite trees, the occasional oil pump nodding rhythmically. On the horizon. "Are we almost there?" Miguel asked for the dozenth time, his face pressed against the window. "Almost," Maria assured him, though her own stomach was twisted in knots. What had seemed like a dream yesterday now felt terrifyingly real as they approached the unmarked road Heather had described. The entrance was understated, a simple but elegant iron gate with no name or indication that it belonged to one of country music's biggest stars. Maria stopped at the call box and gave her name. Moments later, the gates swung open silently. "Wow," breathed Sophia, as they drove down a winding road flanked by ancient oak trees. "Is this where the prince lives?" Maria laughed despite her nerves. "Not a prince, sweetie, just a very successful singer." The main house came into view, an impressive but tasteful limestone ranch house that blended harmoniously with the Texas landscape. It wasn't the ostentatious mansion Maria had half expected, but rather a home that spoke of comfort, tradition, and deep Texas roots. As they parked beside a modest collection of vehicles, Heather emerged from the front door. In person, she was younger than Maria had expected, perhaps mid-30s, with a warm smile that immediately set Maria slightly more at ease. "You found us!" "Welcome," Heather said, extending her hand to Maria before crouching down to the children's eye level. "And you must be Miguel and Sophia. Mr. Strait is excited to meet you both." Miguel stepped slightly behind his mother, suddenly shy, while Sophia, who had never met a stranger she didn't immediately befriend, smiled broadly. "Do you have horses?" she asked hopefully. Heather laughed. "We do indeed. Maybe later. If it's okay with your mom, someone can show you the stables." She led them through the house, which was elegantly decorated with a distinctly Western aesthetic: cowhide rugs, rustic wooden furniture, and rodeo memorabilia tastefully displayed, alongside family photos. Maria tried not to gawk, but it was difficult not to be impressed by the casual luxury surrounding them. They were shown to a comfortable sitting area on a covered patio overlooking rolling hills and a distant line of trees marking a creek bed. The view was breathtaking, pure Texas hill country in all its rugged glory. "Please make yourselves comfortable," Heather said, gesturing to the seating area where a pitcher of lemonade and cookies awaited. "Mr. Strait will join you shortly." Once alone, Sophia immediately reached for a cookie while Miguel remained plastered to Maria's side. "Mijo, it's okay," Maria assured him, squeezing his shoulder gently. "Remember how much Abuelo loved Mr. Strait's music? This is a special opportunity." "Your mama's right," came a familiar voice from the doorway. "Though I'm just a regular fella who got lucky enough to make a living doing what I love." George. Strait stood there, dressed casually in jeans, a button-down shirt and boots, no different from how he might dress to work his ranch on any given day. There was nothing about his demeanor that screamed superstar, only the quiet confidence of a man comfortable in his own skin. Maria quickly stood, instinctively smoothing her dress. "Mr. Strait, thank you so much for inviting us. It's such an honor." "George, please," he corrected gently, moving forward to shake her hand. "And the honor's all mine." He crouched down, just as Heather had done, to address the children. "You must be Miguel and Sophia. Your mama told me a little about you yesterday." Sophia, mouth full of cookie, nodded enthusiastically while Miguel offered a tentative, "Yes, sir." "Well, I'm mighty pleased to meet you both," George said with genuine warmth. "I hear you might like to see some horses later on." Sophia's eyes widened. "You have real horses?" "Sure do. Can't have a proper Texas ranch without horses now, can you?" He winked at her before straightening and gesturing for Maria to sit. "Thank you for coming all this way. I imagine you're wondering what this is all about." Maria sank back onto the cushion, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Yes, I am," she admitted. "It's not every day a country music legend asks to meet with you after a drive-through encounter." George settled into a chair across from her, his expression turning more serious. "Maria, I've been blessed beyond measure in my life. Good family, good health, and a career that's lasted far longer than I ever dreamed possible. But with those blessings comes responsibility. At least that's what my daddy always taught me." He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. "Sometimes God puts people in your path for a reason. When you told me about your father, your nursing studies, those two beautiful children you're raising on your own, well, something just clicked." Then Heather did some asking around Cotulla, hope you don't mind, and every single person had nothing but good things to say about Maria Sanchez. Maria blushed deeply, both touched and embarrassed by the thought of George Strait inquiring about her around town. "So here's what I'd like to do, if you'll allow it," George continued. "I'd like to establish a scholarship fund to cover the remainder of your nursing education, including books and supplies. Additionally, I'd like to help you with housing, either repairs to your damaged home, if that's possible, or assistance, finding and securing a new place for you and the children." Maria stared at him in shock, certain she had misheard. "I'm sorry. You want to pay for your schooling and help with your housing situation," George confirmed calmly. "No strings attached, no publicity required, just one father honoring the memory of another father who believed in his daughter." Tears sprang to Maria's eyes, unbidden and unstoppable. Beside her, Miguel looked alarmed, placing his small hand on her arm. "Mom, are you sad?" She shook her head quickly, wiping at her cheeks. "No, mijo, these are happy tears. Sometimes grown-ups cry when they're very happy." George smiled at the interaction before continuing. "There's something special about you, Maria, the way you've carried yourself through adversity, the way you're raising these children while pursuing your education, the kindness you showed me, just another customer in your drive-through. The world needs more people like you, especially in healthcare." "I don't know what to say," Maria whispered. It's too much." "It's not charity," George said firmly, seeming to read her thoughts. "Consider it an investment in a better future, for you, for your children, and for all the patients you'll help once you become a nurse. Your father believed in you. Now I do too." As the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the patio, Maria tried to process the magnitude of what was happening. This man, this legend, was offering to change the trajectory of her family's life based on a brief encounter. And the stories of her neighbors. It seemed impossible, like something from a dream or a movie, not something that happened to ordinary people like Maria Sanchez from Cotulla, Texas. Yet looking into George Strait's eyes, she saw nothing but sincerity. And perhaps, she thought, this was exactly what her father had always promised her, that if she worked hard and stayed true to herself, someday her efforts would be recognized. Perhaps this was Marcos Sanchez, watching over his daughter even now, guiding a country music star to a small-town Dairy Queen on a seemingly ordinary April morning. The next few days passed in a blur for Maria. After accepting George's offer, how could she not? Things moved with startling efficiency. Heather had arranged for her to meet with a financial advisor the following Monday, who explained how the scholarship fund would work. By Wednesday, her tuition for the remainder of her nursing program had been paid in full, lifting an enormous weight from her shoulders. On Thursday, a real estate agent called to schedule viewings of 3-bedroom houses within a reasonable commute to both the Dairy Queen and her nursing school. The agent had been instructed to find properties that would provide stability for Maria and her children, with yards for the kids to play in and safe neighborhoods with good schools. This can't be real, Maria whispered to herself repeatedly throughout those days, pinching her arm when no one was looking, half expecting to wake up from an elaborate dream. But it was real. The paperwork proved it. The paid tuition balance proved it. The scheduled house viewings proved it. George Strait had stepped into her life like a guardian angel and changed everything. Maria had promised George she would keep the arrangement private at his request. "I don't do this for recognition," he had explained. "Norma and I believe in helping where we can, but we prefer to keep it between us and the family involved." She had agreed readily, though she did tell Aunt Carmen and Javier the basics, that George Strait had indeed offered to help with her education and housing. Their stunned expressions had mirrored her own initial disbelief. Keeping the secret became increasingly difficult, however, as Maria's circumstances began visibly changing. She reduced her Dairy Queen hours to part-time to focus more on her studies. She began house hunting during her days off. Her perpetual stress lines started to fade as, for the first time in years, she caught glimpses of a secure future within reach. It was Linda, the assistant manager with a perpetual chip on her shoulder, who first began asking pointed questions. "So, Maria," she said during a rare lull in the Friday afternoon rush, her tone deceptively casual, "Debbie mentioned you're cutting back your hours. Got a rich boyfriend we don't know about?" Maria concentrated on restocking the napkin dispenser. "Just restructuring my schedule to focus more on nursing school," she replied evenly. Linda leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "A nursing school suddenly got cheaper because last month you were picking up every extra shift you could get." "I received some financial assistance," Maria said carefully. "A scholarship opportunity came through." Linda's eyebrows rose. "Must be some scholarship to cover tuition and a new house. Janice from the bank says you're looking at properties on Oak Street. Those aren't exactly student budget homes." Maria felt a flush creeping up her neck. Cotulla was too small for secrets. She should have known that. Everyone knew everyone else's business, and Linda's cousin worked at the local bank where Maria had been pre-approved for a mortgage, with a substantial down payment provided by George Strait's foundation. "I'm just exploring options," Maria hedged, desperately wanting to end the conversation. "Sure," Linda drawled, clearly unconvinced. "Nothing to do with a certain celebrity who came through the drive-thru last week? Marcos would be so disappointed." Maria's head snapped up. "What is that supposed to mean?" Linda shrugged with exaggerated innocence. "Just saying there are only so many ways a single mom suddenly comes into money. People talk, that's all." The implication hit Maria like a physical blow. "That's not— How dare you—" she sputtered, rage and humiliation burning through her. Linda walked away, leaving Maria trembling behind the counter. Was that what people thought? That she had somehow sold herself to George Strait? The very idea was so outrageous, so insulting to both her and to George, that she could barely process it. By Monday morning, the whispers had spread throughout the Dairy Queen staff. Maria felt it in the sidelong glances, the conversations that stopped when she entered the break room, the overly polite interactions that masked unasked questions. Javier remained steadfastly supportive. "Ignore them," he advised during their shared lunch break in the alley behind the restaurant. "They're just jealous. They've known you your whole life. They know what kind of person you are." "Do they?" Maria wondered aloud. "Because Linda practically accused me of prostituting myself to George Strait." Her voice broke on the words. "How could anyone think that of me? Of him?" Javier sighed heavily. "People can't stand to see others succeed, especially if it seems sudden or unexplained. If you won a lottery, they'd find a way to criticize how you spent the money. If you married rich, they'd call you a gold digger. There's no winning with some folks." "I didn't even do anything to deserve this," Maria said softly. "He just decided to help, because he's a good person, because something about my story touched him." "Exactly," Javier agreed, and that's all that matters. In a few months you'll be in your new place, closer to finishing your degree, and all these people can eat their words. Maria tried to take his advice to heart, but the whispers were taking their toll. Worse, they were beginning to affect Miguel and Sofia. That afternoon, she received a call from Miguel's teacher, explaining that he had gotten into a fight at recess. "He was defending you," the teacher said gently. "Apparently, some of the children have been repeating things their parents have said about your change in circumstances." Maria closed her eyes in pain. One of the most treasured aspects of small-town life, the close-knit community, had turned against her, poisoning even her children's world. "I'll talk to him," she promised. That evening, sitting on the edge of Miguel's makeshift bed, Maria struggled to find the right words. "Amigo, your teacher called today." Miguel's eyes, so like his father's, immediately filled with tears. "Bobby Lee said you did bad things with the cowboy singer man for money. I told him he was a liar and pushed him." Maria gathered her son into her arms, her heart breaking. "Miguel, listen to me. Mr. Strait is helping us because he's kind and generous, not because of anything bad. Sometimes people don't understand kindness that doesn't benefit them, so they make up ugly stories." "Why can't we tell everyone the truth?" Miguel asked, his small face contorted with confusion. "Because Mr. Strait asked us not to talk about it. He doesn't help people for attention or praise. He does it because it's the right thing to do." Maria smoothed his hair back from his forehead. "We need to be as honorable as he is, by keeping our promise." Miguel nodded solemnly, but Maria could see the burden this secret was placing on his young shoulders. She decided then that she would speak with Heather about the situation. Perhaps there was a way to address the rumors without breaking her promise to George. Before she could make that call, however, the situation escalated dramatically. On Wednesday morning, Jack Davidson, the regional manager for Dairy Queen, made an unexpected visit to the Cotulla location. Davidson was known for his stern demeanor and rigid adherence to corporate policy, making his rare appearances a source of anxiety for the entire staff. Maria was in the middle of her shift when Debbie called her into the back office. When she entered, she found Davidson seated behind the desk, his expression grim. Debbie stood uncomfortably in the corner, avoiding Maria's questioning gaze. "Miss Sanchez, please sit down," Davidson said, gesturing to the chair across from him. Maria perched nervously on the edge of the seat. "Is there a problem, Mr. Davidson?" "Indeed there is." He steepled his fingers beneath his chin. "It has come to my attention that you have been using your position at Dairy Queen to solicit personal favors from customers." Maria gasped. "What? That's absolutely not true. We have multiple reports that you leveraged an interaction with a celebrity customer into personal financial gain," Davidson continued coldly. "Furthermore, there are suggestions that you have been discussing this arrangement with other employees, creating a disruptive work environment." "That's not what happened at all," Maria protested, her voice rising with indignation. "I never solicited anything from anyone." Davidson raised an eyebrow. "Yet suddenly, you're reducing your hours, buying property well above your pay grade, and paying off educational debts that you've been struggling with for years, all immediately following a visit from Mr. Strait to this very drive-thru." "Whatever help I received was offered freely, not requested," Maria insisted, her hands shaking. "And I've kept the details private, as requested. It's others who are spreading rumors and making disgusting insinuations." Davidson's expression remained unmoved. "Regardless of how it came about, Miss Sanchez, using your position here to establish personal relationships with customers for financial benefit constitutes a serious violation of our code of conduct." Maria felt the blood drain from her face. Are you firing me?" "I should," Davidson said bluntly. "However, given your length of service and previously unblemished record, I'm placing you on 2 weeks probation. During this time, you will work register only, no drive-through duty. Additionally, you will be required to attend ethics training through our corporate portal. Tears of humiliation and rage burned behind Maria's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of this man who had just reduced the most miraculous event of her life to some sordid transaction. I understand, she said stiffly, though she understood nothing except the burning unfairness of it all. Davidson wasn't finished. I also expect you to make a full disclosure to the staff about the nature of your relationship with Mr. Strait to put these disruptive rumors to rest. At this, Maria's head snapped up. I can't do that. I promised him privacy. Then perhaps this isn't the right workplace for you after all, Davidson replied coolly. The meeting concluded with Maria in a state of shock. As she emerged from the office, she realized that the entire staff had been gathered in the dining area, which had been temporarily closed to customers. All eyes turned to her, some sympathetic, others curious, a few openly hostile. Davidson followed her out and addressed the assembled employees. As some of you may have heard, there have been concerns about appropriate customer-employee interactions at this location. Miss Sanchez has been placed on probation pending a full review of recent events. I want to be clear that Dairy Queen does not condone using your position here to solicit personal benefits from customers, regardless of their public profile. Maria stood frozen, mortified beyond words as her colleagues absorbed this public rebuke. Linda smirked openly while Javier looked outraged. Debbie studied the floor, clearly uncomfortable with the situation but unwilling to contradict her superior. Would you like to address your colleagues, Miss Sanchez? Davidson prompted, putting her squarely on the spot. Maria looked around at the faces of people she had known for years, some since childhood. How had helping George Strait through a drive-through window, an encounter lasting less than 5 minutes, led to this moment of public shame? How had accepting a generous offer from a kind-hearted man somehow transformed her in the eyes of her community, from hard-working single mother to opportunistic gold digger? I have nothing to say, she finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper, except that I have always performed my duties here with integrity, and I have never solicited anything from any customer. With that, she turned and walked out. The front door, ignoring Davidson's sharp call for her to return. She climbed into her car, hands shaking so badly she could barely insert the key into the ignition. Only when she had driven several blocks away did she pull over and finally allow the tears to come. Sitting there in her aging Honda, sobbing against the steering wheel, Maria faced the cruelest irony. The blessing that should have changed her life for the better had somehow twisted into a curse, threatening her reputation, her job, and her standing in the only community she had ever known. What would she tell the children? How would she face her colleagues tomorrow? And most importantly, what would George Strait think if he knew his generosity had inadvertently caused such chaos in her life? As the Texas sun beat down on her car, Maria made a decision. She couldn't continue like this. Something had to change. Either she needed to break her promise to George and reveal the truth publicly, or she needed to find another way to clear her name. With trembling fingers, she pulled out her phone and scrolled to the number Heather had given her for emergencies. This, she decided, as fresh tears spilled down her cheeks, definitely qualified as an emergency. Heather answered on the second ring. "Maria, is everything all right?" Maria struggled to speak through her tears. "I'm sorry to bother you. I wouldn't call if it wasn't important, but everything's falling apart." "Take a deep breath and tell me what's happening," Heather said, her voice calm and steady. Sitting in her parked car, Maria poured out the whole painful story. The rumors spreading through town, Miguel's fight at school, and now Davidson's public humiliation and probation. "People think that George and I somehow traded favors for his help," she finally managed, the words burning her throat. My manager is demanding I explain everything publicly, which means breaking my promise to keep this private. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Maria, I'm so sorry this is happening, Heather finally said. This is exactly why George prefers to keep these arrangements confidential. When they become public knowledge, they often create more problems than they solve. I don't know what to do, Maria admitted. I can't lose this job. I still need it even with the scholarship, but I also won't break my promise to George. You won't have to, Heather assured her. Let me speak with George and call you back. We'll figure something out. The next hour was among the longest of Maria's life. She drove home in a daze, grateful that the children were still at school and Aunt Carmen was at work. She needed space to process the morning's humiliation before putting on a brave face for her family. When her phone finally rang, Maria snatched it up. Heather? It's George, actually, came the familiar drawl. Heather filled me in on what's happening and I'm mighty sorry about all this, Maria. It's not your fault, Maria said quickly. You tried to do something good. I never imagined people would react this way. People can be cruel when they don't understand something, George sighed. Listen, I'm playing a show at the AT&T Center in San Antonio this weekend. It was already scheduled, part of the Cowboy Rides Away tour. What would you think about me addressing this situation there? Maria's heart skipped. You mean publicly? But you wanted to keep this private. Some things matter more than privacy, George replied firmly. Your reputation and your children's well-being matter more. Sometimes you have to stand up and set the record straight, even when it's uncomfortable. I don't want to make trouble for you, Maria protested weakly. George chuckled. Maria, I've been in this business for over 30 years. Believe me, I can handle a little controversy. What I can't abide is someone suffering because of my good intentions. They spoke for nearly half an hour, developing a plan. George would address the situation during his concert, explaining how he'd met Maria and why he'd chosen to help her family. He wouldn't mention the Dairy Queen by name or directly reference Davidson, but he would speak clearly about the injustice of the rumors and assumptions. We'll send a car for you and the kids, George said as they concluded their call. You should be there to hear it firsthand. George, thank you, Maria said, her voice thick with emotion. Not just for this, but for everything. My father was right about you all along. After hanging up, Maria felt a curious mixture of relief and trepidation. George Strait was going to publicly defend her honor before thousands of people. It was simultaneously the most extraordinary and most terrifying prospect she could imagine. Telling Miguel and Sofia proved challenging. How could she explain the complexity of the situation to children so young? In the end, she simply told them they were going to a special concert on Saturday night to see Mr. Strait perform. Will he sing about us? Sofia asked excitedly over dinner. Maria smiled. Not exactly, sweetheart, but he might talk about us a little bit. Saturday arrived with nerve-wracking speed. Maria dressed with particular care, choosing a modest blue sundress that had somehow survived the tornado. She braided Sofia's hair and made sure Miguel's cowboy boots, a treasured gift from his grandfather, were polished to a shine. You look beautiful, Sabrina, Aunt Carmen said softly as Maria applied a touch of mascara. Since their conversation with George, Carmen had been uncharacteristically quiet, perhaps finally understanding the magnitude of what was happening. I'm terrified, Maria admitted. What if this makes everything worse? Carmen shook her head. Marcos always said George Strait was a man of honor. Trust him, Maria. Trust your father's judgment. The black SUV arrived precisely at 6 o'clock, driven by a courteous young man who introduced himself as Justin, one of George's assistants. The children bounced with excitement in the back seat as they made the hour-long journey to San Antonio, while Maria sat in tense silence, imagining all the ways tonight could go wrong. Justin led them through a private entrance at the AT&T Center, bypassing the massive crowds flowing through the main doors. Backstage was a flurry of activity. Crew members with headsets, musicians tuning instruments, security personnel scanning passes and credentials. "Mr. Strait wanted me to take you directly to your seats," Justin explained, leading them through a maze of corridors. "He's doing his pre-show routine, but he'll look for you during I Cross My Heart. You'll be right up front, center section." Their seats were indeed exceptional, close enough to see every expression on the performers' faces. Sophia's eyes grew wide as dinner plates as she took in the enormous stage and sophisticated lighting equipment. Even Miguel seemed impressed, his earlier reluctance forgotten in the excitement of the moment. As the lights dimmed and the ace in, the whole band took the stage to thunderous applause. Maria felt her anxiety mounting. How would George address her situation? How would the audience react? Would anyone from Cotulla be here tonight to witness it? George Strait's entrance was met with a standing ovation that seemed to last forever. Dressed in his signature starched shirt, jeans, and cowboy hat, he embodied everything people loved about country music: authenticity, tradition, and unassuming charm. He launched into his opening number, the upbeat Oceanfront Property, followed by a string of his greatest hits. Several songs into the set, George paused to speak to the crowd. "Folks, I want to thank you all for coming out tonight. After all these years, it still amazes me that y'all want to hear these old songs." The audience roared their approval, many holding up signs professing decades of devotion to the king of country. "I've been blessed beyond measure in my life," George continued, his voice growing more serious. "Blessed with family, health, and the chance to make a living doing what I love. But with those blessings comes responsibility. At least that's what my daddy always taught me." A hush fell over the arena as 20,000 people sensed this wasn't the usual between-song banter. "Last week, I stopped at a Dairy Queen drive-thru in a little town called Cotulla." George's eyes found Maria in the front row, and he gave her a subtle nod. "I met a young woman there, a single mother working full-time while putting herself through nursing school. When I asked about her story, she told me about losing her home in a storm, about struggling to raise two beautiful children on her own, about her late father, who had been a fan of my music." Maria felt tears welling in her eyes as 20,000 heads swiveled, everyone trying to locate the woman George was describing. "Something about her story touched my heart," George continued. "Here was someone doing everything right, working hard, studying hard, being a good mother, yet still barely keeping her head above water. I've been fortunate enough to help people now and then throughout my career, usually privately, because that's how Norma and I prefer it. But this time, I'd like to make an exception." He gestured toward Maria. "Maria Sanchez and her children are here tonight. Stand up if you would, Maria, so folks can see you." On trembling legs, Maria rose, holding Sophia's hand while keeping her other arm around Miguel's shoulders. A spotlight suddenly illuminated them, and 20,000 faces turned their way. "This young lady never asked me for a thing," George emphasized, his voice ringing with conviction. "She served me coffee with a smile and treated me like any other customer, even after recognizing me. When I learned about her circumstances later and offered to help with her education and housing, she was reluctant to accept, worried it might seem improper, worried about what people might think." George removed his hat, holding it over his heart in a gesture of profound respect. "Sadly, her concerns weren't unfounded. Since accepting help, Maria has faced cruel rumors and professional consequences. Some folks seem to think there's no such thing as simple human kindness anymore, that there must be some hidden, unsavory motive behind one person helping another." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, many shaking their heads in disgust at the implication. "I'm here to set the record straight," George declared firmly. "My support for Maria and her children comes with no strings attached. It's simply one parent, trying to honor the memory of another parent, her late father, who believed in his daughter's dream of becoming a nurse. Sometimes, folks, kindness is just kindness." The arena erupted in applause. Maria stood frozen in the spotlight, tears streaming freely down her face now. Beside her, Miguel looked up with a mixture of pride and confusion, while Sophia waved enthusiastically at the crowd, clearly enjoying the attention. "Now, I understand Maria's father particularly loved this next song," George said, nodding to the band as the familiar introduction to "I Cross My Heart" began. "Marcos Sanchez, this one's for you wherever you are. Your daughter is making you proud every single day." As George sang the romantic ballad that had been her parents' wedding song, Maria felt a profound sense of vindication washing over her. Here was one of the biggest stars in country music history, publicly vouching for her character before thousands of witnesses. Whatever happened next, no one could take this moment from her. What Maria couldn't know was that multiple audience members were recording George's speech and uploading it to YouTube and Facebook, even as the concert continued. By midnight, the video would be spreading across social media platforms, accumulating hundreds of thousands of views and generating headlines across Texas. After the concert, Justin escorted them backstage, where George was waiting in his dressing room. "Come here," he said simply, opening his arms to Maria. She stepped into his embrace, still overwhelmed by the magnitude of his gesture. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't even know how to begin to thank you properly." George smiled, releasing her to crouch down to the children's level. "Did y'all enjoy the show?" he asked, as Sophia immediately launched into an enthusiastic account of her favorite songs, while Miguel nodded shyly. "I meant every word I said out there," George told Maria as he straightened up. "And I suspect things will get better in Cotulla after tonight." "Or they might get worse," Maria said pragmatically. "Mr. Davidson won't appreciate being contradicted, even indirectly." "Let me worry about Mr. Davidson," George replied with a knowing smile. "Something tells me he'll be singing a different tune very soon." George was right. By Sunday morning, the video of his speech had been viewed over 2 million times. His kindness was trending on Twitter, with thousands sharing their own stories of unexpected generosity and the skepticism they'd faced afterward. Major Texas news outlets had picked up the story, praising George Strait for standing up for a hard-working single mother. Maria woke to dozens of text messages and voicemails from friends, acquaintances, and even a few local reporters seeking comment. Aunt Carmen brought her coffee in bed, a rare luxury, and showed her the San Antonio Express news story on her tablet. George Strait defends single mom against rumors after act of kindness. "Dios mío," Maria breathed, scanning the article which detailed how George Strait had set the record straight about his purely philanthropic relationship with Cotulla resident Maria Sanchez, and condemned the small-town gossip that had threatened her reputation and livelihood. The most surprising call came at 9:45 that morning from Dairy Queen's corporate headquarters in Minneapolis. The vice president of operations personally apologized for Davidson's handling of the situation and informed Maria that he had been placed on administrative leave pending a full review. "Dairy Queen values community and treating each other with dignity," the executive explained. "Mr. Davidson's actions were not consistent with our corporate values. We'd like to offer you your full position back with no probation and compensatory pay for any shifts you missed." By Monday morning, the tide had completely turned. When Maria arrived for her shift, Debbie met her at the door with a hug. "I'm so sorry, Maria. I should have stood up to Davidson. I knew you would never do what he was implying. Even Linda approached awkwardly during the morning lull. I might have jumped to some conclusions, she admitted, not quite meeting Maria's eyes. My cousin at the bank shouldn't have been talking about your business in the first place. Maria accepted the apologies graciously, though she couldn't help noticing how quickly people switched sides when public opinion turned. Only Javier had stood by her consistently, and she made sure to thank him properly. Told you it would work out, he said with a grin. Though I didn't expect George, Strait, to go to bat for you quite so publicly. That man's got class. As Maria worked the drive-thru that morning, restored to her regular position by Debbie's explicit instruction, she marveled at how drastically her life had changed in less than 2 weeks. From a chance encounter with a country music legend, to public humiliation, to triumphant vindication, it was more dramatic than any telenovela her Aunt Carmen watched religiously. The company car that pulled into the drive-thru shortly before noon was immediately recognizable. The same black SUV that had transported her family to the concert. Justin's friendly face appeared at the window. "Package for Maria Sanchez," he said with a smile, handing her a small envelope. "And Mr. Strait said to tell you there's more where this came from." Inside was a handwritten note. "Maria, kindness wins in the end. Your father would be proud. More news coming soon. Keep the faith. George." Attached was a check, not from George personally, but from his Maria's for Nursing Foundation, with a memo line reading, "First disbursement." The foundation name made her breath catch. Had he really named it after her? As Justin drove away, with a friendly wave, Maria clutched the envelope to her chest, her mind spinning with possibilities. Whatever more news George had planned, she had learned one undeniable lesson through this extraordinary experience. Sometimes the most unexpected encounters truly could change everything. 6 months could change everything. Maria reflected on this truth as she stood in the living room of her new home, a charming 3-bedroom ranch-style house on a quiet street with mature oak trees and a fenced backyard where Miguel and Sofia could play safely. Sunlight streamed through windows that didn't need to be propped open with books, illuminating walls that she had painted herself in warm, welcoming colors. The more news George had hinted at in his note had arrived 3 days after the concert, in the form of official documentation establishing the Maria's for Nursing Foundation. The name was indeed a tribute to her, but also cleverly incorporated George's wife's name, Norma, who had enthusiastically supported the initiative. The foundation's mission was simple yet profound: to provide comprehensive educational support for single parents pursuing nursing degrees. Maria had been invited to serve on the advisory board, lending her first-hand experience to help shape the foundation's policies and selection criteria. Her first suggestion, that recipients be required to pay it forward through community service rather than monetary repayment, had been unanimously approved. The transition from recipient to participant in George's philanthropy had been humbling. More surprising was how quickly her life in Cotulla had returned to normal, or rather a new normal, in which she was treated with a curious mixture of respect, mild celebrity, and occasional awkwardness from those who had been quickest to believe the worst of her. Davidson had not returned to the Cotulla Dairy Queen. Rumor had it he had been transferred to corporate headquarters for sensitivity training before being reassigned to a desk job far from day-to-day restaurant operations. Debbie had been promoted to regional manager in his place, instituting a kinder, more supportive workplace culture that had improved morale throughout the district. "Mom, Miss Heather is here!" Sophia's excited voice broke through Maria's reflections. Heather had become a regular visitor, handling local foundation business and becoming something of an honorary aunt to the children in the process. "In the living room, Misha," Maria called back, smoothing her nursing scrubs. Today marked another milestone, her first day of clinical rotations at Cotulla Regional Hospital, the final phase of her nursing education before graduation. Heather appeared in the doorway, Sophia bouncing alongside her. "Ready for the big day?" she asked with a warm smile. Maria exhaled slowly. "As ready as I'll ever be, nervous, excited, terrified, all of the above." "You're going to be amazing," Heather assured her, setting down her laptop bag. "That's not just my opinion. Your instructors say you're one of the most promising students they've had in years." Maria blushed at the praise. "They're being kind. I still have so much to learn." "Don't we all?" Heather agreed, settling onto the couch. "Speaking of learning, I have some foundation updates to review with you before you head to the hospital." And the past 6 months had seen the Mariah's for Nursing Foundation grow from a simple scholarship fund into a comprehensive support program for single parents in healthcare education. Beyond tuition assistance, the foundation now provided childcare stipends, housing allowances, and mentorship opportunities. What had begun as one man's impulsive act of kindness toward a drive-thru worker had evolved into a structured program, poised to help dozens of families across Texas. "We've selected our first 5 additional recipients," Heather announced, showing Maria the profiles on her laptop. 2 from San Antonio, 1 from Laredo, 1 from Corpus Christi, and 1 from right here in Cotulla. Maria leaned forward eagerly. "Elena Martinez got accepted. That's wonderful. Her situation is so similar to mine. 3 children, working 2 jobs while studying. She's going to be an incredible nurse." "Your recommendation carried a lot of weight," Heather replied. The board was particularly impressed by her community health initiatives at the migrant worker clinic. As they reviewed the other selections, Maria felt a surge of pride, unlike anything she had experienced before. These strangers' lives would change dramatically because George Strait had chosen to help her and because she had somehow found the courage to accept that help despite the temporary cost to her reputation. "I've saved the biggest news for last," Heather said, closing her laptop with a mysterious smile. "George and Norma would like you and the children to join them at their ranch next weekend. There's something they want to discuss with you in person." Maria raised her eyebrows. "Any hints?" "Let's just say it involves the Foundation's future, and they value your input." Heather glanced at her watch. "But right now, you'd better get going. Don't want to be late on your first day." Aunt Carmen arrived to watch the children, hugging Maria tightly before she left. "Your father is watching today," she whispered. "He would burst with pride to see you in those scrubs." The drive to Cotulla Regional Hospital took only 12 minutes from Maria's new home, another blessing of her changed circumstances. As she parked in the student section of the lot, she allowed herself a moment to marvel at how drastically her life had transformed since that April morning when George Strait had appeared at her drive-through window. Her first day of clinical rotations passed in a blur of new faces, procedures, and responsibilities. By late afternoon, Maria had assisted with intake on 6 patients, learned the hospital's electronic record system, and earned a rare compliment from the notoriously stern charge nurse for her careful attention to an elderly patient's concerns. "You have good instincts," her clinical supervisor observed as they completed the day's paperwork. "Patients trust you immediately. That's something that can't be taught." Maria thought about her father, who had always said she had healing hands, even when she was a little girl, placing bandages on his minor work injuries. "Thank you," she said simply. "That means a lot to me." As she walked toward her car in the fading October light, Maria's phone chimed with a text message. It was from Javier. "Check YouTube now." Puzzled, Maria sat in her car and opened the app on her phone. The autoplay feature immediately began a video titled "Strait Announces Major Expansion of Nursing Scholarship Foundation." The video from a press conference earlier that day in San Antonio showed George at a podium with Norma beside him. "When I met Maria Sanchez 6 months ago, I thought I was just helping one hard-working mother achieve her dream of becoming a nurse," George was saying to the assembled reporters. "What I didn't expect was how that single act would grow into something much bigger than either of us." The camera panned to show a row of people seated behind him. Representatives from major Texas healthcare systems, the State Nursing Association, and several universities. Maria recognized the president of her own nursing school among them. "Today, I'm pleased to announce that the Marias for Nursing Foundation is expanding statewide, with commitments from 5 major hospital systems to provide guaranteed employment opportunities for our scholarship recipients upon graduation," George continued, his normally reserved demeanor animated by evident passion for the project. Additionally, 10 Texas universities have agreed to reserve spots in their nursing programs specifically for qualified single parents selected by our foundation. Maria gasped, immediately understanding the magnitude of what George was announcing. This wasn't just about financial aid anymore. This was about reshaping the entire pathway for single parents to enter the nursing profession. "Our goal is simple," George concluded, "to remove every obstacle between dedicated single parents and their dreams of serving their communities through healthcare. Because when they succeed, we all benefit. Their children, their patients, their communities, and our state." A reporter called out from the audience, "Was Maria Sanchez involved in developing this expansion?" George smiled warmly. "Maria has been instrumental. Her insights as both a nursing student and a single mother have shaped every aspect of this program. In fact, once she completes her degree next spring, she'll be joining the foundation in a formal leadership capacity, if she accepts our offer." He looked directly into the camera, as if speaking to Maria personally. "We're hoping she will." Maria sat stunned in the hospital parking lot, tears streaming down her cheeks. A leadership role with the foundation, the opportunity to help shape a program that could change hundreds of lives. It seemed impossible that all of this had sprung from a chance encounter in a drive-through lane. The weekend meeting at George's ranch confirmed everything from the press conference and more. Seated at the same patio table where he had first offered to help her, George and Norma outlined their vision for Maria's role in the foundation's future. "We need someone who's lived it," Norma explained gently. "Someone who understands both the practical challenges and the emotional toll of balancing parenthood, work, and education. Someone with both compassion and backbone." "We think that someone is you," George added. "Once you've got your nursing degree in hand, of course. Your education comes first, always has." Maria looked out over the rolling Texas landscape, considering their offer. "I always imagined myself working in a hospital, providing direct patient care. This would be different." "You'd still be healing people," George observed, "just in a different way, and maybe with a broader impact." That night, back home with the children tucked into their beds, real beds in their own rooms, not couch cushions on an aunt's living room floor, Maria sat on her back porch and called her old mentor from the Dairy Queen. "Javier, if someone had told you a year ago that George Strait would be offering me a job running his foundation, what would you have said?" she asked when he answered. Javier laughed. "I'd have said they were loco, but having seen everything else that's happened, nothing would surprise me anymore, Maria. You deserve all of it." "Do I, though?" she wondered aloud. "Sometimes I still feel like I just got lucky. Right place, right time, right person coming through that drive-through." "Luck is when preparation meets opportunity," Javier countered. "You were already doing everything right, working hard, studying, being a good mother. George just recognized what was already there." The question is, what will you do with this platform you've been given? The answer became clear to Maria over the following months as she completed her clinical rotations and prepared for graduation. The foundation work called to her in a way she hadn't anticipated, offering a chance to multiply the blessing she had received many times over. On a perfect May morning, Maria Sanchez walked across the stage at San Antonio College's nursing school commencement. As she accepted her diploma, she heard cheering from where Miguel and Sofia sat with Aunt Carmen in the audience. Turning to smile in their direction, she caught sight of a familiar figure standing at the very back of the auditorium, partially obscured by a column, George Strait, in his signature cowboy hat, applauding quietly. He had come, just as he had promised 6 months earlier, without fanfare or publicity, to witness the culmination of what he had helped set in motion. Their eyes met briefly across the distance, and he touched the brim of his hat in a subtle salute before slipping out a side door. Later that afternoon, as family and friends gathered in Maria's backyard for a celebration, a courier delivered a small package. Inside was a framed photo of the Dairy Queen drive-thru where it had all begun, along with a handwritten note. Life's most important journeys often start in the most ordinary places. Congratulations, Nurse Sanchez. The real work begins now. George. Underneath was an antique silver pin in the shape of a nurse's lamp, the kind given to nursing school graduates in decades past. Maria recognized it immediately as the pin her father had purchased at an antique store years ago, saving it for the day she would complete her nursing education. She'd thought it lost forever in the tornado. Somehow George Strait had found it, or one remarkably similar, and returned this piece of her father to her on her graduation day. How he had known about the pin, Maria couldn't guess. Perhaps Aunt Carmen had mentioned it, or perhaps some mysteries were better left unexplained. 2 weeks later, Maria began her dual career, working 3 days a week at Cotulla Regional Hospital's pediatric unit and spending 2 days at the Foundation's new offices in San Antonio. On her first day at the Foundation, she hung the framed drive-thru photo prominently on her office wall, a reminder of how extraordinarily lives could change through one unexpected encounter. That evening, as she tucked Sofia into bed, her daughter asked the question she had been pondering herself. "Mommy, why did Mr. Strait pick you to help? Out of all the people in the world?" Maria smoothed her daughter's hair thoughtfully. "I don't know for sure, Mija. Maybe he saw something of himself in our family's struggles. Maybe he was missing his own father that day, or maybe sometimes people just do kind things because they can, and because they should. Like you're doing now with the other mommies and daddies who want to be nurses," Sofia asked sleepily. "Exactly like that," Maria replied, kissing her forehead. "Because kindness should always keep moving forward, from one person to the next, making the world better as it goes." As she turned out Sofia's light, Maria caught sight of her nursing pin, now permanently affixed to her ID badge. She touched it gently, a silent acknowledgement of her father's presence in this moment of triumph. From a Dairy Queen drive-thru to a nursing career and foundation leadership, Maria's journey had been anything but ordinary. Yet perhaps the most extraordinary part wasn't the dramatic rescue by a country music legend, but rather what that rescue had revealed. The power of one person choosing kindness and another person having the courage to accept it, creating ripples that would continue to spread long after that fateful April morning when George Strait ordered breakfast tacos and changed a family's destiny forever.